Outside of technology tools like yours, what do you think salespeople need the most today to be effective and successful?
As just a general trait, I like to think of the trait of curiosity. I think if you're curious, you're a good salesperson because you're just constantly learning. You want to know more. Like you actually care. What does the customer do? What's their role? What's their job? What's their company do? How do they make money? What are their challenges? If you're not curious, then you're mostly inward focused. How can I sell what I have to sell?
Well, I think the other part of the trait of curiosity, and this is something that we preach a lot in our training, especially in improv, is the curiosity about the person, about the buyer.
And improv is the definition of curiosity, right? That's why you say.
And it sounds like you know a little bit about improv because you referenced yes and, so you understand that.
We did a training because I'd seen some folks do improv, and I was like, this is awesome. And so we brought in the head of the troupe and did a training for our whole team a couple of years ago in the office. It's immediately applicable to, in my opinion, any type of job. It's great for sales, but it's also great for support, right? How do you handle a support ticket coming in? Yes, and let's try this, and let's troubleshooting is an exercise in improvisation. So getting used to that process and being able to embrace it and enjoy it, hopefully, I found it to be some of the best quote unquote professional development.
Welcome to the Pivotal Leader Podcast with Gina Trimarco, featuring lively interviews with CEOs, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders who share their stories and best practices for shifting business from problems to profits. Sit back and get ready to pivot.
Hey everyone, this is Gina Trimarco, Chief Results Officer of Pivot 10 Results, a strategy and training company that helps businesses shift from people problems to performance results. Each week on The Pivotal Leader, I feature inspirational leaders who know how to positively impact their customers, employees, and brand through culture building. On this episode of The Pivotal Leader, I'm interviewing Brandon Bruce, COO and co-founder of Cirrus Insight, a plugin for Gmail and Outlook salespeople. Bruce grew up in a tiny California town of 800 people where he only had one classmate and a school using outhouses as their bathroom. Gosh, I want to hear about that. He went from those humble beginnings to co-founding and growing Cirrus Insight to $12 million in revenue and number 41 on the Inc. 500 after a 6-year roller coaster of success and setbacks. Cirrus Insight is a plugin for Gmail and Outlook for salespeople. It's an all-in-one sales productivity platform with world-class Salesforce integration. So let's listen in and learn from Brandon. Hey, Brandon, welcome to the Pivotal Leader.
Thanks, Gina. It's great to be with you.
Awesome to have you. I know you're not that far away in Tennessee, not that far away from South Carolina, and we're both enjoying a hot summer.
Yep, the hot summer before the battles of SEC football start here in the next couple of weeks. So,
oh, yeah, that's one thing
exciting, we hope.
I know you're from California, and I'm originally from Chicago. One thing I learned about moving to the South is, boy, they love their sports more than anyone in the world.
Yeah, you can't really be agnostic.
No.
I came here and I was like, heck, I guess my school, UC Santa Barbara, was undefeated because we didn't have a football team. We excelled at sports we were like number one in the country at ultimate frisbee and surfing and swimming and water polo. And then here, everyone's like, whatever. What about football?
Yeah,
so I was
exactly.
like, it doesn't really matter. Well, it does matter, right? It's like one of the huge things culturally. So we follow the team pretty closely, and our office is 2 minutes from the stadium. So we're in the game now.
It's interesting, and the focus of this podcast, we're going to be talking about sales. It's really interesting how you have to sometimes base your business on what's going on geographically. I mentioned we own an improv comedy theater, and coming from Chicago, and I have this background in live theater marketing, and I had to sort of change my entire approach with owning this theater because on Saturdays in September, forget about it. Nobody's coming out to a show because it is like the height of college football. I can't even get performers to perform on Saturdays in September and October. So we've had to get creative on selling people what they want based on football. It's crazy.
No doubt. No, it has a huge impact on the local economy, right? If the team's winning, we're selling a lot of stuff that's orange. Yeah. All the downtown businesses do well; they're all happy, and there's a huge conflict check as far as if you're a nonprofit or a company that wants to do a retreat or a big like that. Probably not a good idea to do it on a home game Saturday.
Exactly.
For one, all the venues are booked anyway, and for another, sometimes traffic will shut down the interstate.
Yep.
Because it's that big. So you kind of want to revolve around that event is the sun. So if you're bringing in folks for your company, your nonprofit, then you're going to want to take them tailgating or get a block of tickets at the game. Everyone's going to be there and everyone's excited.
Yeah, you have to fit in with that culture. Everyone loves a great hero's journey story. So I'd like to start out with your humble beginnings, because that really caught my attention with the outhouse and the small classroom. So I want to start with your humble beginnings beyond your tiny town. And who is Brandon, and what are some of the milestones that led up to co-founding Cirrus?
Yeah, no, it's a fun story to tell. I'm a small town kid, so this is Los Olivos, California. To give folks a sense, if you haven't been there before, it's where they filmed Return to Mayberry on our main street, which is Grand Avenue.
Wow.
So it gives you a sense of the size of the town. And the school I went to in grade school, which is still there, it's called the Family School. It's a wonderful place. So all credit due to them for creating a school where kids can be kids. It was very self-directed learning. So I remember, one of my friends picked up an algebra book and started learning algebra. And I was like, well, I don't want to be left behind. I'll learn algebra too. And so, I just picked up the books and started learning the math. That's kind of how it went. So we had great teachers, and it was also very outdoors oriented. The big risk was simply keeping an eye out so that you avoided rattlesnakes and tarantulas and spiders and so forth. But it was great to be able to get out, in nature and explore the world and learn that way. So it was very much Little House on the Prairie, and was a great way to learn and just sort of flex your creative muscles. And I tend to think it was kind of, it was entrepreneurial in a lot of ways. Before, obviously, I was thinking along those lines, but it was a place where you could, explore topics that you were interested in. And if you got interested, the teachers would kind of flex around that and say, okay, well, if you're interested in that, why don't you make it your science project, or why don't you write a journal entry about it? So I loved it there. And fast forward to now, I had a great upbringing in Southern California, the Central Coast, around Los Olivos. And now, years later, I'm in Knoxville, which is kind of a big, small city, right? We have a really fast-growing tech scene. We're next to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, which is the most visited national park in the country. Right up the street, the other direction, is Oak Ridge National Laboratory, which was pivotal in the Manhattan Project. That's where uranium enrichment happened in the 40s, and where today they maintain a nuclear arsenal and do a lot of energy research. So it's a neat community to be in, because there's a combination of, the great outdoors and a lot of really, really smart people that come out of Oak Ridge and come out of University of Tennessee and the surrounding colleges.
Interesting.
And high density of PhDs. So anytime you're flying in and out of Knoxville, for those that may come and fly in and out of Knoxville, there will be a nuclear physicist on the plane, which is kind of cool. And sometimes you'll sit next to them and they'll tell you a story. So it's a neat community to be part of. And we're happy to have been able to start here and also grow here. And I think it's been one of our competitive advantages in a lot of ways, because we've been able to stay very focused and tap into the local talent here, which is immense.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit about Lincoln, Nebraska, right? There are areas where you don't really think about, like, oh, that's kind of a happening area for innovation and technology. And that's another area that has that attracts people from the West Coast to relocate and be innovative. So it sounds like Knoxville is similar. I had no idea. So it might be a new market I need to come visit.
Yeah, well, my mom's family is from Nebraska, from Omaha.
Oh, really?
And so we still have family there in Lincoln and in Omaha.
Oh, wow.
And I think it's an amazing story. So I remember visiting there, going to a tech conference in Omaha a few years ago. And I was telling my mom all about it. And she was kind of perplexed. She's like, are we talking about the same Omaha, where I grew up? I was like, yeah, it's got a really happening downtown. And it's got microbreweries and great restaurants.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty cool place.
Yeah, really cool. Same with Lincoln. I have a client there that I work with, so I'm there every other month. So I really love it there. It's kind of like, to me, a little hidden secret. So what brought you to Knoxville? I
followed my wife. So she's a professor.
Good reason.
Professor of sociology. Yeah.
Good
so
man.
when she went on the job market and had a number of different offers, she found Maryville College in Maryville, Tennessee, small liberal arts college, and said, this is exactly the type of place that I like. She had done her undergrad at Southwestern University in Texas, and said, this is very similar to what I like. She had been doing research at Georgetown University prior to that. And so we moved down here from Washington, D.C., pretty much sight unseen. We didn't know anybody here. We didn't have any friends or family, but we got a warm welcome to the community. I think in part because the community has been welcoming, folks from the outside, if you will, for a long time. right? They welcomed a lot of scientists and workers in for the Manhattan Project in the 40s. They welcomed a lot of folks in the 30s because of TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, which electrified the South. And then there's some big companies based here. Scripps Networks Interactive, which was recently acquired by Discovery, is based here. So there's a lot of folks here that are producers, media personalities, translators, digital graphic artists. So that adds a lot of diversity to the community, which I think it's exciting to see them growing. And we have Pilot Flying J, which Warren Buffett just acquired or is in the process of acquiring. Clayton Holmes is here, another Warren Buffett company.
Oh, and then there's that connection because Warren's from Omaha.
Warren's the Oracle of Omaha, and he apparently likes Knoxville and likes the entrepreneurs that build companies here, family businesses, quite a bit.
Okay, so Knoxville's definitely on my list to come visit for sure now. It's
an open invitation to any listener. Come especially on a Friday, because we have a company lunch here at Cirrus Insight. So anyone's always welcome to join us on a Friday. We'll feed you some barbecue and it'll be good time. Perfect.
So tell us a little more about the story behind Cirrus's startup. What inspired it? How did it get started? What was a little bit of like your background that brought you to this point?
I think a lot of tech companies start out with friends in college, and oftentimes are launched in college because it's a great time to launch a company. You're learning a lot, and you've got some spare cycles where you can work on projects. For me and Ryan, who's my co-founder, we met in college, and we loved the idea of sinking our teeth into a full-fledged startup, but we never quite got there. We worked on a bunch of projects. We had a bunch of ideas we were excited about. He went on to work for IBM. I went on to work largely in the nonprofit sector and get my MBA and law degree. He went on to get his MBA. And then about 7 years ago, and we had kept in touch since then. So that's the big takeaway, is keep in touch with your great friends from school. He got in touch and said, hey, I've been working in Salesforce for a lot of years. Great platform, growing crazy fast. A lot of customization is possible. It's kind of transforming how customer relationship management software is distributed. It's in the cloud now, and this is making a big difference. He said, but there's a gap. There's a gap between Salesforce, this one fast-growing cloud platform, and Gmail. So G Suite now, the Google Cloud. He said a lot of companies, there were about 500 million, I was at that point, using Gmail as individuals. But his insight was a lot of companies are starting to use it because they want to be in the cloud on the email side. And this was before Microsoft had released Office 365. So when companies were going cloud, they were going Google, they were going Salesforce, but there was no application to connect those two platforms. So if you wanted to keep track of, okay, I see this customer in Salesforce, but how many times have we interacted? How many emails have we sent back and forth? How many meetings have we had? How many calls? What's the status of the opportunity? I need to update their phone number. That sort of stuff just wasn't happening. So credit to him, obviously, for starting to build and executing on an extension that fits nicely into Gmail that allows primarily salespeople, but also anyone that works in Salesforce, to easily update records in Salesforce without ever leaving the inbox. So you can be in there and create new contacts and close opportunities and sync all your emails and calendar appointments. That way it keeps Salesforce up to date. You can run intelligent reports, and you're not stuck doing a bunch of manual labor, which, safe to say, nobody really likes doing a lot of copy pasting. Salespeople really don't like doing it, to the point that they simply won't do it because it's a waste of time.
Yeah.
And good managers will agree with that, right? They want their sales team out there building relationships, selling. And so we try to take on, some of the heavy lifting of making sure the right data goes to the right place at the right time.
So what went into making all of this happen? What did you have to do to make all this happen? So it started out as this idea, which is always great. And then what?
The two big roles were Ryan on the architecture, engineering, product development side of the house. And then the big question for me was, okay, I really want to get involved. This is super exciting. What is my role as the quote unquote non-technical co-founder? What the heck does that person do? And so in my language, it was just self-described. I need to figure out the go-to-market. I need to figure out, A, does this thing have value? If so, what is its value? What more value can we add to it? And the only way that I knew to figure that out was to hit the phones in the inbox and contact people and ask. And so while Ryan was, hustling to build this great application in the beginning of the larger Cirrus Insight platform, my job was to spend 8, 10 hours, 12 hours a day talking with people. And that's what I told my kids and still tell them, what do you do for work? I basically talk with people for a living and try to figure out what they want. And then I try to give it back to them. The formula is relatively simple. It's the execution that's hard. So I spent a lot of time talking with people and said, hey, if we could connect Gmail with Salesforce, would you be interested in trying it? If you are willing to try it, that's great. What is your feedback? And so early on, we got about 1,000 pilot users that way through just grassroots outreach and a simple one-page website that said, put in your email if you want us to send you our Chrome extension for Gmail. And from that feedback, we essentially learned two things. Number one, we can add a lot of stuff to this application. So it built our roadmap for like 9 to 12 months of just feature requests, ideas to make it, make their jobs more efficient, make them more effective at selling. So we were like, great, that's a lot of work to do. And the second takeaway was it was adding value already. It was saving people a lot of time. Time is money. And so they liked it and they wanted to keep it. And then several expressed, and this was a really important kind of pivotal milestone, is I built the first website and I was in a hurry to do it because I wanted to launch it before my son was born. And so we launched it at midnight. My son was born the next day. So it was perfect timing. So we got the website out, but in my haste, I had not made it invisible to Google. So Google indexed it. And then one of our pilot users went in and found the website and paid for the application. And we hadn't tested that yet. We weren't ready to release to the public yet. We weren't even going to charge our pilot users yet because they'd given us feedback. So we were going to let them use it for another 3-4 months. So I called that person because we got pinged them by text message. Ryan had wired it. So as soon as the money hit the bank account, we get a text message that said, hey, something worked, right? You got an order. So I called and I said, hey, we're not planning to charge you yet, but we really appreciate the vote of confidence. And they said, well, 3-4 months, not that long of a time. I'm going to pay for it anyway. So I'd like to just be your first customer. And that was awesome. So when Ryan and I talked shortly thereafter and said, do we want to actually launch, or do we want to go in the lab, go in the tank, if you will, for the next 6 months and knock out a bunch of these features that we think are really exciting that the public really wants? We decided to launch. And I still think that was the best decision we've made in the life of the company. We've been doing it 7 years now. But the best decision was simply to get out to market with an application that at the beginning really did two main things. One, allow people to save emails to the right records in Salesforce. And two, look up Salesforce information in the inbox without leaving and opening up another browser tab. And those two things saved people enough time that they were willing to pay for it. And it got us to market first. And we were able to get our first 500 customers and create that cash flow flywheel, pay off a loan we had taken out to do some of the initial development of the app in coordination with Ryan. And so that got us going. And of course, it was only 2 months later or so that we had our first competitor in the market. And so it was just useful to have that short head start and then create that customer feedback loop.
So if you were to do it all again, you would probably take the same approach?
Yeah, I think a lot of the early stuff that worked the best and honestly still continues to work. And anytime we stray from it, we try to, course correct and get back to it, is talking with the customer. I mean, it just can't be overstated or overrated. And I work on go-to-market. So sometimes we'll huddle with the marketing team and it's like, let's come up with a new, better, slicker tagline or something to go in this email message, so forth. And we'll craft it and wordsmith it. But when a customer writes, just an honest review of the application online, it's invariably better than anything we come up with. The way the customer simplifies it and just says, this is what I did. I used it. It saved me time. Time makes all the difference, et cetera. And it's like, boom, they encapsulate it all in a quick snippet better than we could after, 2 weeks at a retreat or something. So their feature requests, their marketing feedback, et cetera, is always the thing that has helped us kind of figure out what's next for Cirrus Insight.
I think there's two serious learnings from this. Number one, a lot of people fall into this, a lot of businesses fall into this, but go ahead and launch. It might not be perfect, but launch something. Number one. Number two, always be reaching out to your customers and communicating with them and finding out what is it that they need. That's like sales 101 that I think a lot of people miss, whether they're salespeople or they're entrepreneurs building a company. No question.
I think Seth Godin is one of those personalities that I try to read everything he writes, right? All his books, his blog posts every morning that come out about 6 o'clock Eastern.
Yep.
And of course, that's one of his big themes, right? Make a ruckus and you have to ship something. Like it's fun to ideate, think about what you want to do next, strategize. That's all great and it's important. But it's not that important if at the end you don't ship something, if you don't share something creative and valuable with the public, right, with fellow humans, and try to try to move the needle. So yeah, I mean, we're in the software business. We have to ship stuff every day. So not a week goes by that we don't push new code. But it's important that that was kind of part of the culture, if you will, from day one, because it's been an important part of who Cirrus Insight is and how we work.
Yeah. And again, I think people get so held back on trying to create the most perfect thing to launch. I'm the same. I've been struggling with something I'm trying to launch, and I like kick myself. I'm like, just launch a part of it. Just do it. Just get that one piece off the ground and stop overthinking it. So this was a good reminder for me to, it was a good kick in my butt for that. So thank you.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think we all have that because we know that as soon as it goes out, it's subject to judgment. And all of us have some, most of us, I always you sort of envy, and you're sort of also concerned about people that just are ambivalent to judgment whatsoever. Because that's like, wow, they're impervious to it. Like they just don't care. They don't even hear it. And on the one hand, it's sort of awesome. And on the other hand, it can be somewhat dangerous, right? Like they're not hearing anything. We need to somehow get through to this person. But I think, developing, some thickness of skin that at least enables you to ship something and be willing to receive that feedback. And thankfully, when it's good, people will tell you, and that makes you feel good and makes you want to do it again. And then when something goes wrong, they'll tell you also, and hopefully in a nice way. And I'd say 99% of the time, people, especially your customers or people that want to be your customers, are doing it in a very proactive way. I mean, you're essentially partners together. So they're not going to yell and scream about a bug in the software. They're just going to be like, look, I found this and it doesn't work right. I really want you to fix it because I want it to work because I want to pay you.
Yeah.
It's like, well, we're on the same team. That doesn't sound like we're at odds at all. And then there's going to be the 1% or just the people that just go off the rails, right? Those are the same folks that troll on social networks and so forth. It's like, I don't know, folks that just have way too much time. So
I call them, that's the cray-cray factor. That's
exactly. And then you just kind of have to be willing to, deal with it, right? So there are people, you got to have ways to respond to them and ways to train the team around, okay, this is how we deal with those. Just like in retail, everyone's seen a little bit of retail rage when they've been in a store like Gap or something and someone just goes off the rails because the belt doesn't fit or whatever. And it's like, this is unreasonable. But they have methods to sort of calm people down, hopefully, and move on to the next customer. So we, all of us have to do the same thing. But it's focusing on the 99% that you're delivering value to.
Exactly. And I think, that also involves a lot of training and how to deal with some of the crazy and unreasonable. And there's a little bit of, I always believe there's a little bit of ounce of some truth or validity in that person who kind of goes off the hinges and they just don't know how to communicate it properly. And it's also good to hear that.
I think that's true. I think you're right. I think oftentimes it's just a lack of ability to communicate, which becomes really frustrating.
Yeah.
When people can't, they don't feel like they're getting through to you, then the volume goes up and the anger in the words increases. So and kind of our internal, playbook, and I kind of had to figure this out for myself early on because I was doing sales support marketing. So we're all in one person. And so when someone would get, in my view, kind of unreasonably upset, right? That's the email that comes through that includes some language, right? That you can't repeat. It's sort of like, whoa, I didn't expect this one. Generally, our playbook is respond to the customer in the medium that they chose. So if someone reaches out in Facebook, then we want to reply through Facebook because they chose that medium. They're comfortable with it. If they email us, we want to email them. But if it comes through and there's vitriol in it, like there's something, terribly wrong here, then I'll usually escalate in the playbook. So if they've emailed, I'm going to call them. Right? If they got super mad on a call, and we're going to try to find a way to meet in person, right? Or I'll send some sort of personal note, like a postal note, right? Something that's just different. It's going to slow things down, calm everybody down to be reasonable. But it's amazing how much getting on the phone establishes that human connection. You just hear the other person's voice. So I've had people send, and thankfully it's very rare, but send an email that's just like insane. And then I'll call them and they'll be like, oh, hey, that's nice to hear. There's a person there. That's great. Hey, and by the way, sorry about my email. It's a tough day. You know how it goes. I didn't close one of my deals. And it's like, oh, no problem. But if you'd just gone based on the email, you would have thought that the world was going to explode. So it's useful just to try to find a medium to connect with them as a human being so that they can be like, I should be cool, because most people are much nicer in person than they can be electronically.
Yeah, which makes for a good segue, because I also wanted to talk about your perspective on today's selling environment, and we do come to rely so much on technology, and what you do is really important, I think, for moving selling forward. I think there's been definitely some disconnect a little bit because we've come to rely so much on technology that we've forgotten to rely on the power of picking up the phone and going past email to have a conversation, because it's better to have an actual conversation. So curious on your perspective on today's selling environment, and where do you think it's going with people heavily relying on technology and not being so hands-on interpersonal communication-wise?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm answering obviously with a built-in bias that we literally make an application that attempts to help people sell, right? And save time by doing things from the inbox. That said, I think it is important to go to market through lots of different media, because you don't know which is necessarily going to hit home. Some people are like super active on LinkedIn, and then others, you don't even have their photo on LinkedIn, and they have like 3 connections, like they've never used it, they've never turned it on, so it's probably not going to work for them. But what I've noticed, especially this year, and we've always been a fan of events. Events give our customers an opportunity to actually meet us in person. We might have been doing business with them for 3-4 years, but to put a face with a name and like, oh, that's awesome, shake hands, is a great thing. It's also been a great way to meet prospects and sort of get through those first, 4, 5, 6 stages of the opportunity in the first 5 minutes, right? You just cover so much more information is shared back and forth in that one-on-one in-person conversation than you can possibly do in a string of back and forth emails or LinkedIn conversations or even phone calls. So we've historically done a lot of events. 2018 has been a huge year for us. I think we've done probably 36 events across the country and a couple out of the United States, overseas. And all of those have been really important for us to, build a good pipeline of prospects, but more importantly, a good pipeline of prospects that we've met in person, and that we can use those meetings to say at the meeting, this is great, you seem really interested, rather than go back and, following up through some sort of drip campaign, which we'll certainly do anyway. But let's just go ahead and we'll just help you install it now, or we'll just do the demo with you in person at the booth at the conference. So yeah, I don't know, what's old is new again, right? All sales used to be traveling salespeople. We're traveling a lot. We want to get out at the events, and more we're also requesting that a company invite us to spend some time with them. Some companies are like, no, we just want to see the online demo. That's great. We've been doing that for 7 years. We're very good at it.
Yeah.
But if they say, yeah, actually that would be great. Why don't you come and spend half a day on the sales floor, just seeing how we work, seeing where the pain points are, listening to our users, gathering feedback, then that's a brilliant opportunity for us, because they'll tell us all about it, right? They'll tell, oh, we're killing it. This is how we're working. But this is a total time suck over here. And I hate when the manager asks me to update stuff on Friday afternoon, like it's a total fire drill, and that's my closing time, et cetera. And it's like, okay, cool, we can help with that. So getting a sense of the culture, the workflow, always, which is then codified in Salesforce, and we integrate super tightly with Salesforce, that gives us the edge in a competitive environment, because now we've been on site and established a relationship, but also just gives us some intel on the ground so that we're not selling a commodity. Right? Because anyone can just sell by the data sheet. I mean, I can hand anyone that's listening right now our data sheet, and you could sell Cirrus Insight. I'd say that for most products. I think it'd be hard to sell like jets to the Pentagon with like a day of training. But for most products, you can get up to speed with the data sheet and go out and sell it. And so, okay, if everyone's doing that, then it becomes a commoditized selling environment. To break through means that you have special information about the customer. And so far, at least, the best case scenario is we've gotten that special information through an in-person meeting. Next best is, phone and email conversations, and then LinkedIn and so forth. But the best is in person still.
So the conferences, it sounds like the conferences have been a big hit for you, because you're able to get in front of a lot of people at the same time to start that what I call developing the warm relationship before you start to then nurture that.
Yeah, and it does humanize in an environment where there's a lot of software that does lots of stuff. And so the big question that all of us have when we're buyers is, okay, cool, I see the software, I like it. Who's behind it? Is it going to be supported? Is there someone available that will train me on it? Are they going to keep adding stuff to the software, or is it kind of frozen in time? And all those become more and more important. The bigger the purchase is and the larger the buyer is, the larger the organization is, because that training, project management, the integration of that tech with all the other tech that they've purchased become increasingly important aspects of the decision-making process, if you will. It's now incumbent to differentiate ourselves. We have to get in front of the customers and meet them. At least in our business, that's what we've been finding. I think if it's 100% B2C and it's t-shirts, like you have to try on every t-shirt that you buy, probably not. Like, your size and you can just buy it online. So I think that's different.
Mm-hmm.
Different sales cycle, different price point, volume thing. But for us in the B2B software game at a reasonable price point, we're middleware, and we augment Salesforce and Google and Microsoft and connect them together. Then for us, it's really important to get to know how the customer works in order for us to sell and say, Cirrus Insight is different than XYZ other sales enablement tools, kind of custom tailor that pitch to what the customer needs.
I completely agree with that, because for me, in selling a B2B situation as well, it's if I can get in front of people and have a conversation or be a speaker at an event or even go to their office. I'm talking to a client right now that's an existing client that is trying to, it's funny, it's their sales team trying to sell me into operations, which, that's always an interesting disconnect between sales and operations. But what I've come to learn is that salespeople are such awesome people to work with for us, because they will actually go sell us to the operations team for additional training, and being willing to say, hey, let me come fly out and spend some time with your executive team. That one-on-one time is so valuable and so worth the money to get in front of them versus trying to show them a bunch of videos of what we do.
Yeah, now if you can find that magical person inside the buying organization that will actually sell you internally, that evangelist, if you will,
right?
Then it's game time. I think one of the best ways that we've found, and we didn't invent this was based on advice from others, is if we're able to go in and in an effort to identify that person, and then once we've identified them to cultivate that relationship, is getting that mobile phone number.
Oh, yeah.
Such a basic thing, right? And yet we forget to do it too often. But the mobile phone number is magic, not because you're going to call them all the time and wear out their minutes, but because of the ability to text message them and receive text messages back. Because that, so far, at least for me, if someone texts me, I'm going to see that message. I'm going to read it 100% of the time. Email, not the case, because so many emails are coming through. LinkedIn, yes, but it might take me a couple weeks to see it because I'm not necessarily going to
I know.
The text message, every single time I will hear the alert, I will check it because it's probably pretty important. So if we have that level, if the person's willing to say, yes, here's my sub, that's a good signal. And then once you text and they're replying, then you're able to cut through a lot of the bottlenecks that go into a buying process, where you're in a security review and you're trying to figure out how much longer is there and is it trending well, or you're stuck in procurement. You're trying to figure out, how long until we arrive at the negotiated price point, or legal is reviewing it and you just want to get a read on how that's progressing, or if you need to spin up your own legal team. Then being able to text that person, get those quick updates and have them say, oh yeah, this is totally normal. This can take 2 weeks, but I'm on top of it. Then you can relax for the 2 weeks instead of worrying that your opportunity just slipped through your hands. So we found in deals, even when people are like, they're in Europe, they're going to take the month of August off. So you're in a total dead zone. You have no idea if the opportunity is progressing or did it stall out or not. Being able to text that person and have them just write back like, yeah, cool, I'm on vacation, but everything this is all perfectly normal. As soon as everyone gets back, we're all going to sign and, we'll do the implementation. It's like, oh, great. But they're not checking their email. They're not going to be checking social networks, but they'll definitely respond to a text message. At least that's been our experience so far.
I've had the same exact experience. So I want everyone listening to take this as a big takeaway. And while everybody has a different communication style, I think to your point, most all of us are on top of our text messages, and for a variety of reasons, right? Especially if you have a family, text messaging, you're always going to be checking that because you don't know if your kids are texting you, if your spouse is texting you. That's my personal opinion. And so if you have earned the right to get someone's cell phone number, you don't have to pester them. But to me, it's been like a faster way to connect with an existing client or even a prospect of like keeping it sort of casual, like, hey, what's going on? Want to grab a cup of coffee today? What do if they're in my area specifically, or if I'm going to be in a city where I know some people, I may text them because I think the text is going to go through much faster. And to your point, I'm like, I'm just answering emails today from last week.
Right.
because I can't keep up with how much comes through, and it just gets parked until I can because one of the things I'm trying to cut down on is jumping on top of email. I'll scan real fast, and if I see it's something that I really need to address quickly, I will, but then everything gets parked because it's not hot enough for me, or it's a distraction.
Yep. No, and then I'm thinking of one deal specifically, one of our larger enterprise customers that we signed about a year ago. We felt like everything was, gangbusters. They came to us and they had done their homework on the market. They knew what they wanted. We were able to show them that we delivered on what they wanted. Great. And then somehow it was like we lost communication. So I'm following up with the account executive, who's one of our sales leaders. And, well, where are we on that deal? He's like, I've called them. I left this many messages. I've emailed, I've looped in some of their colleagues. It's just like dead air. I was like, son of a gun. So we were going back looking through, email signatures, like find the mobile phone number. And I was like, I'm going to text him. And sure enough, I text him and it's like 30 seconds later. Oh yeah, here's the status. So sorry for going dark. We've been busy with a project. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, thank goodness. We're still on track. But for a while, we thought it might be gone. So yeah, for a deal in process, or we found also, on the prospecting side. And interestingly, our conference lead on the sales team here named James, and he's brilliant at working booths and talking with people and just making friends. It's fun to watch, frankly. But one of the things that he's done a lot of the booths is, people are at conferences to have fun. Yeah. Sometimes we forget that as a vendor. We show up and we're like, we're going to educate the world today. We're going to tell them all about our product that we have and really explain how it works and get into detail as soon as they're ready. That's not what they want to do at a conference. They want to go to a conference, hear some great speakers, walk through the expo on the way to lunch, eat lunch, and have a good time. Probably go to the happy hour after the show ends at night. Mm-hmm. So knowing that, he just brings a lot of good energy. Hey, welcome to the conference. Where are you traveling in from? Oh, that's awesome. Here, can I give you, we like to give away stuffed unicorns. So we're kind of famous for that. So give them a stuffed unicorn. Oh, my kid or my dog or whatever is going to love this. Oh, that's awesome. Anyway, often in a short amount of time, 30, 60 seconds, people will see our logo or something like, oh, cool, I want to take a selfie with the unicorn. Like, great. So we'll take a selfie with them and then like, cool, I'll text this to you. What number you want me to send it to? So you text them the photo. They write back, oh, thanks. It was awesome to meet you at the booth. And then, afterwards, after the conference, it was great to meet you at the conference. Do you want to take us up on that demo? No obligation, but if you're truly interested in the app, we'd be happy to show it to you. And they can write back and say like, no, totally. Like we don't even use the software that you integrate with. Okay, cool. Well, it's still good to meet you. But if they write back, yeah, okay, I can do that. Then it's like, oh man, you just cut through like 30 follow-up emails. Yeah. And lots of phone calls and stuff by having that text message. And it's in a nice thread where they're seeing the selfie, everyone's smiling. They had a good time at the conference. We were friendly to them, so they know we're going to take care of them, and they're willing to accept the meeting.
Well, you're also what's great about that is you're creating kind of a memorable situation where they're going to remember you. And while this may not be the thing for them right now, it may be later. Then they'll remember you, or they might refer you. And it's that memorable factor that you're trying to create to build that future business. Did you have a booth at the Sales Hacker conference in New York?
Yeah, that one from a few years ago. Yeah, we did.
I missed the unicorns. I don't know how I missed your booth.
They might have gotten given away pretty early, depending on how many we bring. They can go fast. I mean, sometimes people show up and be like, well, I've got 4 kids, and I'm like, I get it, right? I've got a couple of kids. You can't bring one unicorn and tell them to all share. That's not going to work out well.
I was spending so much time in line waiting for Simon Sinek to sign my book and take a picture with me. So maybe
it was an all-star lineup, right? I mean,
it was amazing.
Seth Godin spoke. It was incredible.
Gary V.
Simon Gary V gave away books, which was super cool. So I got a copy of his book. So that was neat. Got to meet him.
Yeah, and we never met. So this is a great kind of funny scenario that we were both there.
It all worked out.
Yeah. That was such a great conference. That really was an all-star lineup, meeting great people, and I got great contacts out of that. What are some of the top conferences? You said you do a couple dozen. What are some of the best conferences for Cirrus to be exhibiting at? To meet,
for us, we're in the Salesforce ecosystem. So certainly Dreamforce, which is coming up here in a few weeks in September. So we'll have a big team out there. We'll do a sunset cruise on the harbor. A lot of our customers and prospects will have a lot of meetings at the WeWork, the Cata Corner, to the main Dreamforce campus. And it's important to remember, there's 175,000 people that are going to come hang out in downtown San Francisco for Dreamforce. So it's a zoo. And to try to stand out in that environment, you kind of want to brainstorm and be relatively clever about it. At the same time, you have to decide, is it important to stand out, or can you be very strategic, right? And like, hey, we're showing up and we want to have 10 really good dinner, lunch, and breakfast meetings with our most important prospects / customers, and then execute on that plan. So I think that was a learning from our early days. To go into Dreamforce and other big conferences, it was kind of like, well, we'd sign up for the conference, buy the plane ticket, buy the hotel, and then just show up. Like, let's just make this happen. Later, I feel like we got a little bit smarter as far as like going in with very specific goals. Yeah. This is what we're trying to do at this conference. We'll know if we're successful or not if we've achieved X, Y, Z, and then go and execute on that plan. Because otherwise, you kind of finish the conference, you're exhausted, you've lost your voice, you got a pocket full of leads, a bunch of business cards, a bunch of scanned leads, and you're sort of trying to figure out if it worked. The attribution is pretty tricky on lots of those types of experiences because you only capture a fraction of the people you actually met with or that saw you. So you're making branding impressions. You're also having face-to-face conversations. You might be sharing leads between colleagues. Like, I met this person, but you should follow up. So they haven't met them, but they're still going to do the outreach. So attribution can be relatively tricky, but going in with specific goals, I think, has helped us to get more mileage out of Dreamforce. We do the other Salesforce conferences when Salesforce, sponsors or host conferences around the country or the world. We do a lot of trainings, user group meetings, where we can show up in a smaller environment and really do a deep dive and get questions from technical users, administrators, as well as sales leaders. Those we find to be great experiences because we can do the full demo and really show them this is how it would work for you if you want to pursue it. And those are good environments. So it gets a little bit away from, at that point, the cattle call of an expo, and more into the seminar type learning environment.
So do you go into it before you go to any of those, now that you've learned these things, with here are the top 10 potential prospects we wanted for sure connect with or meet with or have dinner with? Do you put that plan in place before you go?
Yeah. And in case of a Dreamforce, which is kind of the big show of the year, that plan is like 6 months out. And then about 3 months out, all those VIP, if you will, invites are out. We're following up, trying to make sure we lock those meetings. And then the rest of the conference can be planned around those. Okay. So it's interesting to think back to when I worked in higher ed. I basically booked my trips the same way, which is let's say I was going to Philadelphia. There's a major donor in Philadelphia. So I would usually call and say, hey, actually going to be up in your area. I'm planning a trip to Philadelphia. When's the trip going to be? When are you going to be there? And then I'd plan the trip around their availability. So if I'm meeting with them on a Tuesday for dinner, then I would call everybody else in greater Philadelphia and say, I'm coming for 3 or 4 days, centered around Tuesday. When are you available around that? But even if no one else had been available, if I could meet with the major donor, it was still obviously worth the trip. So we try to do the same thing with the conferences. If you're getting those top 10, like you say, or 5 or 50 or 100, depending on the business and the size of the deal, then you can kind of fill in with sessions and visits to the expo and all the other stuff that's available at a big conference.
I do the same exact thing every time I travel. Is I try to fill my schedule with who else can I meet with or build business around while I'm there. We talked about Jeffrey Gittimore. I met him at the conference as you did, and he reached out to me about being on my podcast, which was cool. And then I said, hey, I'm going to be in Charlotte in October. Why don't I just come over to your office?
Nice.
And he said yes. So I'm doing other business and then getting a chance to interview him and him interview me. So how do you maximize those opportunities? That's how I'm always thinking about building more referrals and more business.
Yeah, and there's that in person, right? That just cuts through.
Yes.
Say, hey, can I stop by? It's like, or you're asking, inviting yourself over.
Yes.
It's like, well, yeah. And honestly, and it's not like everyone's going to be traveling through Knoxville, but to the extent that vendors have reached out, honestly, regardless of what they're pitching, I mean, if they're like, hey, we're traveling to Knoxville or we're going to be in the area anyway, we'd love to stop by.
Yep.
As long as it's not a totally generic pitch, like they've done a little research, they know what Cirrus Insight is, they know where we're located and stuff. Can we stop by? Can we meet with you? Automatic yes.
Yeah.
Because it's like, yeah, if you're coming all the way out here, absolutely. You just because you want to be hospitable. That's how most of us were raised, right? Like if someone's visiting your house, you want to be nice to them.
Correct.
So inviting yourself over in a nice way is super high hit rate.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about in your bio referenced your 6-year roller coaster of success and setbacks, right? People can always see successful companies as successful overnight, right? That is often the impression, but we know it's not overnight, especially those of us who are entrepreneurs. So what was your roller coaster of success and setbacks like?
Yeah, I mean, I think from early on, the initial success of just launching, where it's like, oh, that's successful in and of itself. We got software out in the world where people could use it. Awesome. And we got those initial customers. So it's like, oh, this is exciting. Not only did we get software out that's helpful to people, but we might be able to actually form a real business around this. And then wondering a month later or whatever it was that all of the customers, right? So it's like a big rush. We launched and people buy. And then it's like, well, now what? Like, well, now we have to get serious. Now we actually have to go to market and start doing things intentionally, like marketing, showing up at events and emailing out to people and calling them and so forth. So it's kind of the up and down, especially in that early, first year or two, of just the variability in cash flow, where one day, 1 week, 1 month, you would feel like, man, we just hit a vein. This is what everybody wants. We're delivering what the market has asked for. We've got kind of initial product market fit. Yay. And then the next day or week or month feeling like, was that it? Should we kind of hunker down and just try to make happy the people that we found already, or are there more out there that we can go find? So, having initial, we largely consider ourselves a bootstrapped startup. We don't have institutional backers, but what was super important early on was having some angel investors, back us, because that helped us in a lot of ways smooth out the variability in our cash flows and gave us kind of the psychological backing and confidence to go out and hire our initial team. Where without that, we would have been like, well, we'd love to have you join the team, and this month has been great, but based on our history, we're not sure if next month's going to be super strong, and we would like to pay you. And they're like, yeah, we would like to get paid. So having a bit of money in the bank at that point was important for us, and obviously a great vote of confidence on behalf of those investors. And we've always been hustling, tried to do right by them ever since. So yeah, and I think certainly on the technology side, anyone that I've talked with that's been in software has a good roller coaster story. For us, we were probably less than a year in. So this was back in 2012, and there was a big, well-publicized, well-known Amazon outage. That was the one that, Netflix went down, Instagram went down, all these famous companies, and then tens of thousands of little tiny companies like us. But I heard from all of our customers within 30 minutes. So at first, when my phone started ringing, I was like, bingo, it's on, right? Everyone wants Cirrus Insight. Then I quickly realized, like, we've got a problem. Right? Our cloud is down. And so that was a hard experience because people weren't super happy that it was down, and there was nothing I could do about it. It was a power outage. So we simply had, calm people and let them know we would get back up as soon as we could. The silver lining to that cloud, unintended, was that some of the customers shared, like, well, Cirrus Insight is a mission critical application for us. So we need to get this back up and running like ASAP. And I had kind of communicated, well, you've still got, Salesforce still running, Gmail still running. So you can kind of just, use the old workflow for now. And then as soon as we're back up again, awesome, we're going to keep serving you. And it's like, no, you don't understand. Like, we won't work that way again. It takes too long. The team is basically like revolting. They won't do it. We're going to go ahead and send them home for the afternoon. As long as it's back up tomorrow morning, we can go back. And I was like, wow, that's great. I mean, that's kind of the feedback you want in the product business, is to know that you're a must-have.
It's kind of like back in the day when there was no such thing as remote controls for TVs, and some people won't remember that, but you like literally had to get up to change the channel. And now that you have remote controls, gosh, God forbid, like it doesn't work, and you're like, what?
Right.
I have to get out of bed and change the channel. What?
Yeah, we had the circuit board in our garage door opener got fried in a thunderstorm. And so it's like, oh no, what do we do? Right? I mean, our car's in the garage and we got to get to work and take the kids around. Like, and it was like, well, yeah, there's that little string that you pull and then you just open the door. Like I did as a kid, right? For like 15 years. You go up to the garage and you open it with your hand and you close it with your hand. Like, it's not a big deal. It's not that heavy. And I'm 6'8", right? So I can touch the top of the garage. It's not a big deal. But still, for a minute, it's like, oh no, the automation is broken. Like, everything has to stop.
I think technology has also created situations where we forget how to be critical thinkers outside of the technology. Like, what do you do without it? And so I'm constantly, and what we do in our business with training is like bringing people back to critical thinking outside of the box, trying to be a little more innovative there are other ways to solve these problems, even though these aren't the ways you've been using.
Right. No, I think one of the things I've tried to do in the past and should continue to do is, if someone has a great idea for a workflow and then they find a technical solution to it, I'm like, that's great. It's a great find. But I like to start by just asking the person or the team to do it manually. Just to validate that, in fact, it is that important, right? Like prove it out, have some initial results, show how long it takes, et cetera. Then we'll test the automated way of doing it, see if it works as well. And if it does, it's an easy decision after that. Right? It sells itself and we'll buy it. But if they're not willing to do it, or they can't do it, or it turns out not to be that great, then at least you haven't automated something that's not that great. Yeah. Because the risk of technology is value neutral. We'll try doing it manually, right? Add the emails into Salesforce manually, and you get people, print screening and uploading PDFs as attachments into Salesforce, and it's an unmitigated disaster. It's a total waste of time. So they're like, yeah, this was brutal. I spent my whole day doing it.
Yeah.
Cool. Now use the tech. But when you just start with the tech, you can treat it as a crutch. It's just like, well, it's always been that way. It's easy. Yeah, I
think building something where you know that here's a manual way to do it, and that's a backup. I had some issues with our bookkeeping, having the right bookkeepers and getting our QuickBooks online working. And finally I was like, well, I'll go back to the old spreadsheet until I can get the right bookkeeper on board. Like, I still need to be able to track my numbers and not be so caught up in the technology, because technology is going to have blitzes and we can't get as frustrated. Sometimes you just have to go back to old school.
Yeah. I guess my best example, I heard a Navy SEAL talk recently, and he showed a photo in his slide deck, and, it showed the Navy SEALs just in swim trunks, treading water around icebergs. And he said, this is called Dry Suit Appreciation Day. They go in without the dry suit and see how cold it is, and have to be in there for like an hour or something crazy. And it's like, oh, I really appreciate the dry suit technology.
Yeah.
I was like, I like that. That's an extreme example.
Yeah, I like that. So it's, I think it's easy to start up a business for the most part, harder to keep it going. But what was it like trying to get some of that in angel investment? What was that process like? How were you able to win that over, get people to give you money?
For us, it was a false start. So there was a strategic company where Ryan, my co-founder, is located in Irvine, California, that wanted to invest in us. And we're like, that's super exciting. So, at that point, we had been out there for 6+ months. So it's like, well, they want to see a business plan. We should write one. So, kind of write up a business plan based on a template and share some projections and pro formas and so forth. And a lot of conversations with them to the point that they said, and we had met with them. And then on the phone, they said, yeah, we're going to invest. Here's how we want to do it. We want to do, this much now. And then assuming we hit these benchmarks, then 6 months, a year from now, we'll put in some more money. And we're like, that sounds great. Let's do it. Well, the next day they were acquired, and the acquirer, shut down all their M&A activity. So we're like, well, son of a gun, what about the plan? So on the negative side, we were disappointed because you start to kind of think about it a lot and in part count on it. Thankfully, we hadn't counted on it to the point that we had started spending. So that was good, because then we would have had to dig ourselves out of the hole. But we had all those plans still, and we had thought a lot about the plans. And so they were carefully crafted. And so after that, when I was telling this same story to an angel investor and just saying like, yeah, we had a strategic, we thought that would come through. It didn't come through. So we'll share the plans that you had shared with them, and read them and said, well, I can do the same deal. I'd like to be involved. And so I was like, well, great. So it was one of those nice bounce back stories of all the time and work that we had thought all of a sudden was now a sunk cost. Like, oh man, we could have spent those, hundreds of hours working in the business instead of telling someone about the business. Yeah. Was all of a sudden it paid off again, because we were able to communicate the vision for the company and how we were going to grow and so forth to that investor and a few other investors that came on after they did. And so anyway, it's a good story because it kind of worked out. But in the short run, it was disappointing because we had a strategic on board that we thought was going to be really valuable to us and help us scale the company. And then they kind of disappeared overnight.
I think what's also interesting about that is that you said that somebody was interested in financing you and then wanted to see a business proposal. And I think this is another important lesson in sales in general, because people buy you, then they want to know the details. So how did you find someone, or how'd they find you to be kind of interested without seeing the proposal first?
Yeah, I think this was that they reached out to us. So I think that they were doing research at the time and were actively investing in startups, and were also acquisitive. They were also acquiring companies in their entirety, but they were heavily in the Microsoft space, and I think had some hooks into the Oracle space too, that had not yet done anything in the Salesforce ecosystem. So, we were local and we were heavy in Salesforce, right? Super knowledgeable in Salesforce. Our customers use Salesforce. And so they viewed the strategic possibilities of investment as being able to diversify and have visibility into a new market for themselves. And they could see it was growing fast. Right? So they had general domain expertise, but not specific. And they were looking to add that through us. So when they saw the potential, that was the start of the conversation. And then they wanted the details. So then it was time to put together the plan and kind of explain where we came from, what it is that we were doing, why we were doing it, and how we were going to get, hopefully to the next level with their help. But yeah, I think more often than not, most of the stories I've heard have been very relationship based in terms of not only sales, fundraising is sales. So it was, we went to school together. I was introduced from a friend who raised money from them before, and they were able to broker the meeting. And there was a threshold level of interest because our website was excellent, or we had gotten some really positive press, or some other kind of intangible piece of goodwill floating in the universe out there that someone sees and says, I like that. Yeah. Then they want to see the plan. It seems like most of the happy ending stories are like that, more so than I sent my plan out to 500 people. Right. Because it's just harder to break through because lots of people are doing that. So it's not as unique.
I talk a lot about that with people who are like looking for jobs. I had a little bit of recruiting experience back in my career, and you get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of resumes, and it's so overwhelming. And then ultimately you're like, okay, I'm going to look at the first 50.
Right.
And then I'm going to be like, okay, before I look at this 50, who do I know?
Right.
Because I don't even want to look at these 50 because it's so overwhelming to look at everything on paper. So going back to the importance of relationship-based selling and showing up and being present and being visible, that actually generates interest in you without you having to go out and sell it. People come to you. And even though that first deal kind of fell through, you had already put all the footwork together. And I'm going to guess that the second company was like, well, that other company was interested in them.
Yeah, exactly. It helps to know that someone else wants it.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool.
The social proof.
So you've been in business now about 7 years. How many employees do you have, or how many people do you have on your team to make things happen?
Yeah, time flies. We got about 58 people on the team, split between Knoxville and Irvine, and a few folks that work remote. And then, from a longevity standpoint, it's been fun to see. We surprised ourselves in 2016. That was the first year we could apply for the Inc. 5000. So we thought, well, we'll do that. That's a cool thing. So we sent in our data and, signed off by CPA, et cetera. And then just kind of waited, and we got an email like, hey, you're on the list. And we were super excited about it. And then we got the second email that said, yeah, you're number 41 on the list. Well, that was surprising to us because we just wanted to kind of be on the list in general. But there was a big shot in the arm to the team of like, well, we've been working hard. And so cool. We've been recognized by, a big brand, the Inc. list, and we're on the list.
Yeah, that's very
cool.
So
it's been, that was 16, and we made the list in the last 2 years as well. Not as highly ranked because, by law of numbers, some companies can pull it off, but generally speaking, it's harder to keep up the same rate of growth. We certainly try, but to be on the list.
Was it Inc. 5000 or Inc. 500?
I guess they're the same thing now. Their branding has kind of changed. They now seem to use the 5000 logo more, but in any case, yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I got it right because I introduced you that way at the top of it. So I just wanted to point out my typo.
41 in 2016, 546 last year, and then this year, 1775. And,
that's awesome.
So it's neat. So we try to keep that up, and it's something the team can kind of watch and pay attention to, and try to keep the growth story going.
How have you been able to attract and retain top talent?
That, I think, has been one of the great things about having a location in Knoxville. It's like a natural matchmaking, and you're in the recruiting business. For us, we're putting the word out that we're a software company. We're software as a service. We're trying to grow fast. There's a lot of opportunity here. It's a pretty flat organization. There's lots of opportunity for advancement. You can get to work on day one. People are coming out of school or have been in the workforce, for 5 years. We skew relatively young, and they're looking to be part of something exciting. And so if they're looking for something exciting and we feel like we're selling something exciting, we find each other. So the best success we've had is, close relationships with the folks that lead, it's called the Anderson Center for Innovation Entrepreneurship at University of Tennessee. My wife's a professor at Maryville College, and I worked there for 3 years. So I know everybody there, and that's been a great pipeline of talent from Maryville College in Maryville, Tennessee. And then just folks in the community that hear about us, that see us doing things in the community with nonprofit organizations, sponsoring things, hosting cool events and happy hours and networking events. And we've also hosted a lot of meetups, coding meetups, business development, sales meetups. It's like, well, we have an office, and so we're happy to host. Part of being, part of the community and the corporate citizen. So all those things, I think, have helped kind of attract the right people. Yeah. And then once we've had a number of them on board, certainly we try to leverage the network effect of like, well, now you know what it's like to work at Cirrus. Do you know anybody in your network of friends and LinkedIn, folks you went to school with 5-10 years ago that you think would fit with us, and we love to talk with them.
So similar to a sales approach, if you're creating those relationships, you don't really have to aggressively go after new business sometimes because it may come to you, or it's easy for you to acquire because they know you. Same thing with talent, I think. They're going to be attracted to you because you have a presence and you find ways to engage them, which makes that recruiting process so much easier.
Yeah, and early on, and Ryan had said this, and we agreed to it. We're like, we're looking in large part for people that are entrepreneurs that want to start their own companies, and they'd like to and be willing to spend some time with us, seeing the mistakes we make and doing better when they do it, learning from the successes that we have and emulating that. And so we've benefited from having a lot of people on board that don't require tremendous structure, that are willing to wear 5 hats across 5 years, right? Work in different departments, and they're not bent out of shape about that.
I interviewed someone several months ago, and I can't remember off the top of my head, the same kind of concept, that they were interested in hiring people that were a little more entrepreneurial mindset, and then helping to actually cultivate some of their desires and wishes as their own kind of entrepreneurs, and letting them innovate more rather than losing them because you've spent all that time and money investing in them, making sure that you're staying open to their thoughts, their ideas, letting them own a little bit more of a process or an idea because you've spent all that time and investment. Why would you want to lose them? Why not let them create something new within your own organization?
Yeah, and that's the best, right? So as long as for the time that we get to work together, they're applying their creativity and energy and work ethic, right? I mean, I always describe my best definition of an entrepreneur that I read or heard somewhere was an entrepreneur is someone who works 80 hours so they don't have to work 40. They prefer it, right? They want something that they can just sink all their energy into. So having those folks on the team has been enormously beneficial and advantageous to us. The catch is, at some point, many of them will in fact go and start their own companies.
Yeah.
And we've seen that too. And that's a hard transition, but it's also one that's anticipated.
Yeah.
So, it's been 3, 4, 5 years and someone says, hey, got this opportunity. I'm going to go do it. It's like, oh shoot, because, we're doing really well together. We got all this stuff built out, but I get it. I understand. And,
it also doesn't have to be the end of a relationship either. It could be, they do their own thing, but then somehow they bring it back to some sort of collaboration. So I think there's those opportunities as well.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, many of them are having great success now running their own companies, and our goal is to be their loudest cheerleader.
Yeah.
We think it's awesome because that's how communities get built, these little ecosystems. Someone has some level of success, and then it spawns, as my son would say, who plays Minecraft, right? He's like, well, I don't have to wait for that. I can just spawn it into the game. But it spawns all these other small companies and creates a network effect. And it's a fun thing to be part of.
Outside of technology tools like yours, what do you think salespeople need the most today to be effective and successful?
As just a general trait, I like to think of the trait of curiosity. I think if you're curious, you're a good salesperson. Because you're just constantly learning, you want to know more. Like you actually care, what does the customer do? What's their role? What's their job? What's their company do? How do they make money? What are their challenges? If you're not curious, then you're mostly inward focused. How can I sell what I have to sell?
Yeah.
I hope they buy it. I hope they take it. I hope they stay with it. I hope everyone gets paid. But if you're curious, like all that information, you'll be able to convey it. That's the easy part. You got data sheets for that. But if you're curious, you're learning more from them. And it's the antidote to one of the things that plagues sales in a lot of high-powered careers is burnout. Burnout's hard because you work super, super hard and then you hit a brick wall or something. If you're curious, it is an antidote to burnout because you want to know what happens next. What can I do better next time? I wonder how this is going to change. I wonder if the company is going to be successful. Let's go find out. And so you stick around and keep working hard.
Well, I think the other part of the trait of curiosity, and this is something that we preach a lot in our training, especially in improv, is the curiosity about the person, about the buyer. And improv is the definition of curiosity, right? That's why you say yes and, because you just want to know, I wonder how this story is going to end and how we're going to get there. What's the journey? Right. If this, then what? That is that platform of being so curious about the person. And something that we push a lot in sales training is, what are you doing to get to know them personally versus following the spec sheets and here's what we sell. But people really want to know that you care about them, and having that curiosity about who they are is going to create that bond and create that trust and create that relationship. And then, let's talk about this product we're selling.
Yeah, no doubt. That's why, most of the successful calls, you start out with some sort of establishment of, I love the word kinship. It's in a book called Tattoos on the Heart by Greg Boyle, which I always recommend to folks. But, it's establishing something. And people in the AI world usually talk about, some sort of pattern recognition. Like, I see you're an alumni of this college and I also went to that college. Therefore, I'm going to use that in the intro. Okay, cool. But it's more the story along with that. Like, hey, do you remember, after we won the national championship in soccer where all the students carried the goal and threw it into the ocean? That's what happened at UC Santa Barbara, right? Because we're a surfing school. Let's throw the goal into the ocean to celebrate. Like, that's unique. And if you weren't at UC Santa Barbara, or unless you watched that soccer game and watched the YouTube aftermath, then you wouldn't know that story. But if you went there and were part of it, it's something you'll remember forever. Also, the gaucho. Like, okay, cool. So are 15,000 of us per year.
Even at the top of this, before we started recording, we were talking about, I had mentioned Jeffrey Gittimore, and you're like, oh, I met him at a conference in New York a couple of years ago. I'm like, was that the Salesforce conference? And sure enough, that was a way for me to find another connection with you.
Yeah, it shrinks the world down pretty fast.
Yeah.
Which is fun.
And it sounds like you know a little bit about improv because you referenced yes and, so you understand that.
We did a training because I'd seen some folks do improv, and I was like, this is awesome. And so we brought in the head of the troupe and did a training for our whole team a couple of years ago in the office. And everyone really enjoyed it. And I loved it so much, I signed up for some classes with the troupe and went
That's
in and
awesome.
like a few weeks in a series. Just because I was like, A, this is super fun, and B, like, it's immediately applicable to, in my opinion, any type of job. It's great for sales, but it's also great for support, right? How do you handle a support ticket coming in? Well, yes, and let's try this, and let's troubleshooting is an exercise in improvisation. So getting used to that process and being able to embrace it and enjoy it, hopefully, I found it to be some of the best quote unquote professional development, if you can call it that, because it's so much fun. But professional development.
And that's always been our struggle through the years. And when we rebranded, our theater's called Carolina Improv, and then we rebranded our training division to Pivot 10 Results. We had to really try to create a distinction of the training will be fun. We wanted it to be fun, but we want you to, walk away with some ROI on that. And what did you learn from it? So now even in our training, I was telling a client yesterday, I'm like, our new goal is to hold our clients accountable going forward.
Yeah.
And literally check in and go, what are you guys doing since we were last there? Like, how are you continuing the yes and training and keeping it top of mind? And how are you troubleshooting with it? And how are you overcoming objections with it? And so we're trying to really stay on top of that accountability piece of it. I'm curious on, especially since you're familiar with improv, how would you innovate something like that further and combine it with technology in some form, right? So it's so interactive, the training that we do, but any thoughts on how you would merge that with technology?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I think, there's some companies out there that are trying to push the envelope in terms of delivery of sales training, which is most frequently delivered in person. I think there's generally a reason for that. Mm-hmm. But there are ways to, I think, intelligently inject parts of the playbook mid process. You just hit this stage of opportunity. Here's some pointers. Mm-hmm. Don't forget. I'm a big fan of the Checklist Manifesto, a book that a physician, Atul Gawande, writes for the New Yorker, wrote. Just because it highlighted, and I'm a checklist person, just highlighted the value of if you make a checklist and then you check off the boxes, good things tend to happen. You don't forget key steps. So I think tech can be useful for helping to implement the playbook from a checklist perspective. Mm-hmm. And how do you infuse it with the audible, to borrow a football term, nature of improv? It's a great question. So super entertaining videos, but also they really hit home because we've all been in those situations and those meetings. Video certainly is a great way to capture some of it. But it's worth thinking through how does Cirrus Insight play a role there? Can we help innovate that? Can some of the listeners who are probably also in the software business come up with some cool ideas for how to do improv with software? Probably.
I'm open to, if anybody wants to throw out some thoughts or wants to have a conversation with me. One thing that we're working on with one of our clients, it's something that we want to beta test, is a kind of measure the results of our training, especially in yes and. So we're creating a yes and challenge, and we're trying to incorporate it into their technology or into their tracking of conversion. Like, how were you able to convert something based on using some of these things that you did in training, and trying to keep it top of mind for them.
Nice.
So that we can measure it. So if you or anybody else out there has some thoughts on that, that would be awesome, because we know that the first thing clients ask is, what's the return on investment? How will we make more money or save more money? So that's something that we're actively working on.
Love it. We're curious. We got a sales team. So
okay, good.
As people innovate, we'll pick it up and use it.
And if you ever need some more improv training, we're happy to come to Knoxville. So
cool. We may take you up on it. All right.
It's going to be another conversation. Actually, I have a friend who used to be part of our troupe that just moved to Knoxville. So you and I will have another conversation on that.
Okay.
A couple other questions before we wrap up. One thing I want to know, I always ask everybody in your type of role, CEO or COO and startup, like you're, at the top and you're trying to make everything happen. Where do you go to get your support, guidance, advice, advisory groups? Where do you get that for yourself?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I've always been a reader, so I certainly read a lot of books. And that's helpful to me because it also slows down and it's non-technology. I think I still prefer books in print. I mean, I read a lot on the Kindle, like on a plane, but I like to hold the book. So kind of old school in that way. I'm a member of EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, right? Where you get together with other owners, founders, operators to, hear their challenges, share your challenges, just get experience-based learning and advice from people that are also in the game. So I think that's helpful. And then, some of the best relationships I've had and still have are with competitors. And sometimes people are surprised by that. Like, well, they're the arch, enemy. Not really. The best place to put a gas station is next to another gas station.
Exactly.
Or at least stopping. And so, if they're growing, then that means we got a good chance to grow and vice versa.
Exactly.
And more importantly, like they're out there doing it. And if they're a competitor or if they're in the overall space, which for us is sales enablement, that means that they're attuned to the same trends that we are. They're looking for the same things. They're trying to talk to a lot of the similar people that we're trying to talk with. And so, none of us are sharing code with each other. None of us are sharing pipeline data, obviously. But what we can share with each other is just like, hey, we feel like when we have these types of conversations, it works out well. It's like, that's helpful.
Yeah.
I'm happy to share that. We're pretty open book and most of the other founders I've met are happy to do the same. And so, I always encourage folks, regardless of industry, reach out and make friends with your competitors. You'll learn a lot from them. They can learn a lot from you and hopefully, rising tide lifts all boats. Plus in the long run, so many industries have eventual consolidation, whether that's through partnerships, whether it's through mergers and acquisitions. So having good working relationships, or at least knowing and being friendly with all the other people in your space, could be good down the road also. So it's not a bad investment.
Yeah, I agree. I goes back to that people by you kind of concept and getting back down to niching. And I partner a lot with, we partner a lot with other training companies and sales training companies because they do something a little bit different than what we do. So we can actually complement each other. And I think that's another source of revenue that people kind of take for granted or overlook or don't think that they should be doing. So I'm huge on how do you kind of get together with your competitors and make things happen. Now you mentioned you're a reader. I'm an Audible junkie, so I'm a big listener. Do you have any top favorite books? I know you mentioned Tattoos of the World.
Tattoos on the Heart is certainly one great book. It's not a business book particularly, but this is about Homeboy Industries, which is the biggest gang intervention program in the world. It's based out of Los Angeles. So there is a business component to it. Sort of a key part of the program is employment, being active on the job, getting stuff done. And that's a big part of it. But, it's a book filled with great stories. He's a great storyteller. And the human aspect of the stories and his focus on, that's where I use the word kinship. The books are about kinship. So I love that one. The Checklist Manifesto is a great one, I think, for any industry, certainly applicable to sales and selling. Yeah, like I mentioned before, anything written by Seth Godin, I think is gold. Worth reading all of his, however many 20, 30 bestsellers that he's had. They're all great. So and I will add anything by Richard Feynman, nuclear physicist during the Manhattan Project.
Cool.
It's great. Super entertaining, very funny, and just great insights into a great thinker, right? Nobel Prize winner in physics, super clever guy, could pick locks, decipher old languages, and obviously was a brilliant physicist also. So good reading.
I'm a big fan of the non-business books as well as the business books. I have a combination of those on my Audible, and a couple of the recent ones I've read that were non-business, but kind of business in a way. The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer.
Oh, cool. All right,
super cool book. I mean, he became this amazing businessman, but he didn't really want to be. He just wanted to be a hippie in the woods. And so it's a really cool book. And then he also wrote another book called The Untethered Soul, about the voices in your head that are always getting in your way. So that's kind of an interesting book.
Nice.
Because now I'm aware of every voice that I hear. Down to like the voice that's like, oh, look at her over there. What is she wearing? And it's like,
right.
stop that. Stop. Why is that voice talking? So thanks for sharing those. It's been great having you. I know we've gone a little bit over time, and that sort of happens when we get into a flow of conversation. So I appreciate your time today. How can people connect with you, learn more about you, learn more about Cirrus, or if they want to try it out? What are some of the best ways to reach out to you?
Yeah, well, first, thanks a bunch for having me. I've really enjoyed the conversation. We'll definitely try to get together and do some improv one of these days. As far as connecting, yeah, if people are coming through Knoxville to go to the Great Smokies, or otherwise come to a volunteers game or something, definitely look us up and shoot us a note through our website, SeriousInsight.com, or shoot me an email, Brandon@SeriousInsight.com, or on LinkedIn, and let us know you're coming, and we'll feed you lunch. Otherwise, yeah, our application is a 2-click install. So if people have been listening are kind of curious, like, wait a second, I use Salesforce at work and I want to connect it to Gmail or Outlook or try the mobile app, then just go to our website. 2 clicks, you can check it out. We've got a really accessible sales and success team here that are Salesforce certified. They know the ins and outs of workflow and process from a sales side. And so they're happy to help answer questions. And if you like it, hopefully you can put it to use.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go check it out for sure. I
appreciate it.
That's definite. Thank you again so much, Brandon, for your time today to be on the Pivotal Leader.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Sure. Well, it's time, everybody, to wrap up this episode. So we're thanking Brandon one more time for being on the Pivotal Leader. But thank you to our listeners today for always listening. And don't forget, if you want to maximize, you need to improvise. And now it's time for that cool voiceover guy to take us out.
You've been listening to The Pivotal Leader with Gina Trimarco, owner and founder of Pivot 10 Results and Carolina Improv Company. You can find show notes for this episode on our website at thepivotalleader.com. The Pivotal Leader is a production of Pivot 10 Results, a strategy and training company that helps businesses shift from people problems to performance results. If your company needs help pivoting to success, visit pivot10results.com or email Gina at gina@pivot10results.com. And until next time, if you're feeling stuck in your business, it's probably time to pivot.